We like to believe we've mapped the story of our planet. Its rise from stone tools to rocket engines, from campfire myths to global cities. But beneath that comforting illusion of progress lies a silence we rarely notice. The silence of everything that came before the written word. What if that silence isn't empty? What if, deep beneath the shifting crust and buried oceans, there once lived a world that reached the heights of its own brilliance, long before ours began? The idea sounds impossible because we measure time by what we can see. Yet the Earth is older than memory, older than ruin, and its surface is a restless stage that erases its own acts. Whole continents drown, mountains rise and crumble, and every trace of yesterday dissolves into dust. If an advanced civilization had existed 100,000 years ago, we might never know. But the thought lingers, like a shadow in the fossil light, asking whether we are truly the first or merely the latest. Tonight, we follow that shadow, not to prove or disprove, but to listen, to imagine what deep time might still be whispering beneath our feet. Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. We have always told ourselves that history moves in one direction, forward. From primitive hunters to farmers, from stone to bronze, from ignorance to enlightenment. The story fits neatly into the pages of our textbooks, comforting in its simplicity. But what if that sense of order is an illusion? What if, buried beneath the noise of our present age, there lies another story? One that began long before the first kings, the first temples, the first words carved into clay. Imagine standing on a quiet plain 100,000 years ago. The air is colder, the stars sharper. Across the horizon, the land stretches unbroken, forests and grasslands rolling into mist. Somewhere out there, a small group of humans gather around a fire. To us, they are the image of simplicity. Animal skins, crude tools, fragile shelters. Yet look closer. Watch the way they speak to each other with their eyes, the rhythm in their hands as they carve, the precision in their movements. Intelligence shines there, something ancient and deliberate, something that feels familiar. What if their world was not as simple as we think? Our image of the distant past depends entirely on what survives, and what survives is random. Stone tools, bones, and cave walls endure. Everything else, wood, cloth, language, dreams, disappears. We assume that what we've found defines what once existed, but that is a dangerous assumption. Time is not kind to evidence. It grinds, buries, melts, and erases. If our civilization vanished tomorrow, 100,000 years from now, only fragments would remain. Bits of metal corroded to dust, the faint chemical fingerprints of our industry, perhaps a few stone foundations twisted by shifting earth. Would anyone who came after us know we once touched the stars? The problem with our timeline is not what we know, but what we haven't yet found. Archaeology works like a candle flickering in a vast, dark cavern. It illuminates only what is nearby. For every artifact discovered, millions more lie hidden or destroyed. Our version of history is a story told from the few scraps that endured long enough to be seen. We believe civilization began 6,000 years ago because that's when we start finding things that survive. Writing, cities, organized agriculture. But human beings like us have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Are we to believe that for 95% of our time on Earth, we simply waited? That for nearly 300 millennia, we were capable of thought, but not of creation? Consider Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, an enormous complex of carved stone pillars built 11,000 years ago, before farming, before cities. Its discovery rewrote everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization. Hunters, it turns out, could also be architects. Now stretch that revelation backward. If a monument that grand could appear 6,000 years before the pyramids, how far back could the pattern go? What if there were other Göbekli Tepes, older, erased, drowned, or buried under continents of time? Earth is not static. Over 100,000 years, it remakes itself entirely. Mountains rise, seas swallow valleys, deserts migrate, ice grinds stone to dust. Even our proudest monuments, skyscrapers, bridges, cathedrals, would vanish under such pressure. Within 10,000 years of neglect, concrete turns to rubble, steel rusts to flakes, glass becomes sand. In 100,000 years, forests reclaim cities, tectonic plates shift, and what once was land may lie under 1,000 meters of water. If such a transformation awaits us, why should we expect the past to have been any kinder to its own ruins? And then there is the sea, the great devourer of memory. During the last ice age, sea levels were over 300 feet lower. Entire continents of dry land, now lost beneath the waves, connected regions we know today as islands. Coastal plains stretched where now there is ocean. If people built there, and humans have always loved the edge of the water, those worlds are now hidden beneath layers of sand and silt, unreachable to all but the most determined explorers. We search deserts and caves for traces of the past, but what if the real story lies under the waves? Science has begun to ask this question more seriously. In 2018, NASA climate scientist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank proposed what they called the Silurian Hypothesis, a thought experiment named after a fictional reptilian race from science fiction. Their question was deceptively simple. If an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years before humans, could we detect it today? Their answer was unsettling. Physical artifacts, machines, cities, bones, would almost certainly be gone. But subtle traces might remain in the planet's chemistry. Unusual carbon spikes, synthetic molecules, radioactive isotopes. In other words, not ruins, but fingerprints. Now bring that thought closer to home. A civilization from 100,000 years ago would face the same fate. Its towers would fall, its tools dissolve, its languages fade. Yet the Earth itself might remember. Buried in layers of sediment or ice, there could be chemical whispers of an ancient industry. Tiny anomalies we have yet to recognize for what they are. We call this science fiction because it disturbs our sense of order. But every great discovery begins as a question that sounds impossible. Even if such a civilization never existed, imagining it forces us to confront our own fragility. We believe our world will last forever because it feels enormous, but from the planet's perspective, we are a brief experiment, a flicker between ice ages. If everything we built vanished, how long before even the idea of us was gone? 1,000 years? 10,000? Would the next species to rise from the ashes ever guess we had once crossed the stars? Look again at those people by the fire, in the cold of a forgotten age. Maybe they were only hunters, or maybe somewhere else on that same planet, others lived differently. on coasts now drowned, in valleys now buried, beneath skies that no longer exist. Perhaps they built things beyond our comprehension, machines of thought, of light, of life. And then, as the earth turned and time unfolded, their age ended. The mystery isn't just whether they were real, it's whether we too are temporary, whether civilization is not a single unbroken climb, but a cycle of rise and collapse, repeating over and over, each leaving less behind than the last. The farther back we look, the quieter it becomes. And in that silence we can almost hear it. The echo of something ancient, erased, waiting for us to remember. If we truly want to understand how a civilization could vanish without a trace, we have to first understand how fragile permanence really is. Look around the world we live in now, the glass towers, the concrete highways, the endless sprawl of metal and light. It feels indestructible. Yet everything we build rests on a foundation of decay. Our cities are temporary sculptures balanced against entropy. Leave them untended for a few centuries, and nature begins to reclaim her own. Leave them for 10,000 years, and the earth forgets they were ever there. 100,000 years is enough time for the planet to start over completely. Erosion is the quiet sculptor of oblivion. Wind, water, and time grind everything to dust. Rain falls into the smallest cracks, freezes, expands, and shatters stone from within. Rivers carve deep canyons, where once there were plains, dragging entire landscapes downstream grain by grain. Even the mountains themselves are temporary, worn away molecule by molecule until they vanish into the sea. Against that slow but relentless power, no monument stands a chance. The pyramids of Giza, the oldest structures still recognizable on Earth, have survived only because of their desert home, their massive scale, and the vigilance of generations who refused to let them crumble. Give them 100,000 more years without care, and they too will fade into the sand. Beneath the surface, the earth itself is in motion. The crust slides on molten rock like a restless ocean of stone. Continents drift apart, collide, and reshape coastlines. Entire regions rise into mountains or sink beneath the sea. Over 100 millennia, a city could be buried beneath miles of sediment, crushed into fossils, or dragged into the mantle where nothing human remains. When we look at a mountain range or a fault line, we're seeing a slow heartbeat that never stops. It's the pulse that swallows civilizations whole. Now imagine an advanced society existing 100,000 years ago. Imagine their structures built near fertile coasts, their cities alive with art, light, and sound. Then picture those same coasts drowned as the ice sheets melted and the seas rose. The continents we know today would look entirely different. Vast plains now hidden underwater were once dry, habitable land. Scientists estimate that over 20 million square kilometers of ancient terrain lie submerged beneath the oceans, territory the size of modern North America. If those lands once held civilizations, their ruins now sleep beneath layers of sand and salt, unreachable except by deep-sea probes and dreams. When explorers study the continental shelves with sonar, they occasionally find strange formations. Terraces that look like roads, ridges shaped like walls, or geometric patterns on the ocean floor. Most of these have natural explanations: erosion, volcanic rock, the illusion of symmetry. But sometimes even scientists admit they're not sure. Could some of these be the ghosts of forgotten architecture, blurred by time and tide? We may never know until we explore them properly. Underwater archaeology is still in its infancy, and the regions most likely to hold ancient secrets are also the hardest to reach, beneath miles of dark, shifting water. And then there is ice, the planet's oldest vault. Beneath Antarctica and Greenland, kilometers of frozen layers preserve the atmosphere itself, trapping bubbles of air older than human civilization. What else might those layers conceal? If a warm period once exposed those lands long before recorded history, perhaps something was built there, then entombed when the next ice age came. It sounds like fantasy, but the planet's cycles are real. We have proof that Antarctica was once green, its mountains home to forests and rivers. The idea that someone might have lived there in a forgotten age doesn't feel so impossible when you realize the ground beneath all that ice once saw sunlight. Even the ground beneath our feet is deceptive. Every inch of soil is a palimpsest, layers upon layers of creation and destruction, a story rewritten by each passing age. Archaeologists dig carefully through these layers, reading them like pages in a book. But the book is incomplete. It's missing chapters, sometimes entire volumes, torn out by time. Most digs rarely go deeper than a few meters, yet 100,000 years of sediment could mean tens of meters of burial. The further down we go, the fewer traces remain, and the harder it becomes to tell natural from man-made. That's what makes the search for deep history so treacherous. We assume the absence of evidence means the absence of civilization, but the truth may be simpler. We just haven't looked deep enough. Modern archaeology was never designed for deep time. It's built to study the last few thousand years, the layers that are easiest to reach, richest with artifacts, and most aligned with written history. To explore 100,000 years into the past would mean drilling through layers of rock, ice, and ocean. It would mean challenging every assumption about what's worth looking for. There's a strange irony in this. Our species spends billions exploring space, searching for traces of alien intelligence in distant stars, yet we've barely begun to explore the depths of our own planet's memory. We dream of ancient civilizations on Mars, but hesitate to imagine one beneath our own oceans. Maybe that's because we fear what it would mean to learn that we are not the first, that others came before us, and that even they could be forgotten. Consider how easily memory fades even within our own history. Whole cultures have vanished in the blink of an eye. The Indus Valley civilization, once home to tens of thousands, disappeared so completely that its language is still unreadable. The Mayans, who mastered astronomy and mathematics, left cities swallowed by jungle. The island builders of Nan Madol, the architects of Great Zimbabwe, the engineers of Pumapunku, all left behind mysteries that defy our understanding. And these are from just the last few thousand years. What chance would a civilization have to survive 100,000? If an intelligent culture once thrived in that distant past, their disappearance would not be mysterious. It would be inevitable. The planet itself is a machine built to recycle everything. Oceans erase coastlines, volcanoes remake continents, ice grinds mountains to powder. Civilization, in the end, is a temporary arrangement of atoms pretending to be eternal. The question is not whether the Earth could erase a civilization, but how many it has already erased. We like to imagine the past as primitive because it flatters us. It tells us that we are the pinnacle, that progress is linear, that we alone have unlocked the secrets of technology and art. But maybe progress is a circle, not a line. Maybe we are part of a pattern the planet repeats, civilizations rising, falling, and leaving behind nothing but traces in the dust. And so the silence of the deep past is not emptiness. It's a whisper, faint but persistent, saying, "You are not the first. You will not be the last." The earth keeps its secrets well, wrapping them in ice and stone, burying them beneath waves and centuries. Every now and then, a fragment surfaces. A strange artifact, a myth that sounds too precise, a structure that shouldn't exist. We call them anomalies, coincidences, misinterpretations. But maybe they're echoes, pieces of a story too old for us to remember, too fragile for us to prove, and too important for us to ignore. When scientists speak about the impossibility of an advanced civilization existing 100,000 years ago, what they usually mean is that there's no evidence. But that phrase, no evidence, doesn't mean proof of absence. It means we haven't found anything yet that fits the narrow categories we expect. The Earth, after all, is a vast and restless archive. It hides more than it reveals. We've mapped only a fraction of its surface, drilled through a tiny slice of its crust, and explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. In the face of such incompleteness, certainty becomes a kind of arrogance. The real problem is that we define civilization in our own image. We assume that advancement must look like us: metal, glass, concrete, engines, circuits. We search for familiar shapes, straight lines, right angles, artifacts of industry. But what if a civilization long before ours advanced along a completely different path? What if their mastery was not technological in the way we understand it, but biological, ecological, or even psychological? A society could be incredibly sophisticated, yet leave behind almost nothing we would recognize. The farther it diverges from our expectations, the more invisible it becomes. Take the idea of material decay. We build our world from substances that last: steel, plastic, stone. But an older civilization might have discovered materials designed to vanish, organic composites that decomposed back into nature without trace. To them, impermanence could have been a virtue, not a flaw. Imagine architecture grown rather than built. Vast forests engineered to form living cities, their branches shaped by design, their roots serving as conduits for energy and water. After the fall of such a society, the forest would simply return to wilderness. What archaeologist would ever know that the trees themselves had once been architecture, or picture tools woven from fibers stronger than steel, but completely biodegradable, or energy systems derived from biological processes, plants that store sunlight like batteries, microorganisms engineered to power machinery? These would leave no ruins, no debris, no monuments. Their civilization could have existed and disappeared in complete harmony with the planet's cycles, dissolving into soil and wind until nothing remained but the memory encoded in myth. We might already have walked through their traces without realizing it. There are cave paintings older than recorded history. Hands stenciled in red, abstract symbols whose meanings are lost. What if some of those marks are fragments of a message, not primitive art, but deliberate communication left by minds that thought differently from ours? To us, they are crude. To them, they may have been language. Our greatest blind spot is recognition. Even if something from that age survived, we might not know what it is. Archaeology depends on context, on finding multiple pieces that fit together to form a story. But a single object, isolated by time, can be misread or ignored. A perfect sphere found in ancient rock is dismissed as a geological oddity. A metallic fragment is explained as contamination. The possibility that it might be artificial is uncomfortable, so we file it away as noise. Every generation inherits its own version of the truth, built from what it can see and what it is willing to imagine. In the 19th century, the idea that humans had existed for more than a few thousand years was considered absurd. Then the first ancient fossils were found, and everything changed. The same could happen again. The next great discovery might not expand our timeline by thousands of years, but by tens of thousands or more. Some researchers have already begun to test this boundary. The Silurian Hypothesis, proposed by NASA scientist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank, suggests that industrial civilizations, even if they existed millions of years ago, might still leave detectable chemical traces. They argue that long-lived isotopes, unusual concentrations of carbon, and persistent synthetic molecules could act as geological fingerprints. In the same way, if an advanced human or non-human culture flourished 100,000 years ago, traces of their activity might remain in the Earth's sediments, if only we knew how to read them. What if the signal is already there, hidden in the fine dust of the ocean floor, in unexpected isotope spikes, in the mysterious composition of ancient ice? We already find chemical anomalies that puzzle geologists, brief surges of carbon, unexplained residues of heavy metals, or microscopic spheres that seem to appear out of nowhere. They are written off as natural fluctuations or meteor impacts, but perhaps some belong to a chapter of history we've never opened. The truth is that our instruments are better at reading the stars than the strata beneath our feet. We scan the atmospheres of distant planets for signs of alien technology, radio signals, industrial gases, thermal patterns, while barely understanding the ancient signals encoded within our own world. Maybe that's the greatest irony. We might be surrounded by the proof we seek, but we're looking outward instead of inward. If an advanced civilization once walked this earth, it would have faced the same forces we do: instability, climate, catastrophe, the slow violence of time. Their rise would have been brilliant and brief. Their fall, inevitable. But what if they foresaw it? What if they built not to endure physically, but to endure conceptually? To leave behind ideas rather than monuments? Perhaps their legacy lives not in ruins, but in us. Genetics gives us a strange kind of mirror. Modern humans carry fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA, echoes of encounters tens of thousands of years ago. Could there be older fragments? Tiny remnants from a people even further back, unrecognized in the code of our cells? If they were human, or close to it, their bloodline might have merged with ours, their knowledge fading into myth while their biology survived. In that sense, we might be the continuation of a story we don't remember starting. The ancient myths from every corner of the world speak of golden ages, forgotten gods, and great floods. The details differ, but the rhythm is the same: creation, rise, hubris, and destruction. Civilizations of light, swallowed by water or fire. Legends of knowledge given and then lost. Maybe those are just stories, or maybe they are the broken memories of an age erased. Memory is fragile. Over a few generations, a fact becomes a fable. Over millennia, even the fable dissolves, leaving only the faint outline of truth. To question the official timeline is not to reject science. It is to admit that the story of Earth is still being written. Every fossil, every layer of sediment, every unexplained structure reminds us that history is an investigation, not a verdict. The further back we look, the more our certainties begin to blur, until only possibility remains. Maybe there was never another civilization. Maybe there were many. The evidence may lie beneath the waves, in the permafrost, or in the unbroken rock below our deepest minds. But whether or not we ever find it, the question itself matters. It reminds us that everything we build is temporary, that progress is fragile, and that the earth will forget us too, given enough time. One day, far in the future, the wind will sweep across the last empty city of humankind, scattering dust where glass once shone. The oceans will rise and fall again, the continents will drift, and the planet will reset. Another intelligence, human, alien, or something yet unimagined, might stand where we are now and ask the same question we ask tonight. Were we the first, or only the latest? If an ancient civilization truly existed 100,000 years ago, then at some point it must have ended. Nothing lasts forever. Not empires, not ecosystems, not even memory. The question is, how? What force could erase a whole world so completely that not a single story, monument, or tool survived in recognizable form? To answer that, we need only look at the planet itself. Earth is not a stable stage on which civilizations perform. It is an active, unpredictable organism, beautiful, violent, and endlessly patient. Throughout its history, Earth has rebooted itself countless times. Ice ages advance and retreat, turning continents into frozen deserts and then back into jungles. Supervolcanoes erupt with a fury strong enough to darken the skies for years, wiping out life across continents. Asteroids strike, oceans rise, and entire climates shift overnight. Each catastrophe becomes both an ending and a beginning. If a civilization flourished 100,000 years ago, it would have lived in the shadow of those same cycles, its fate tied to the rhythm of a planet that never stops changing. Consider the eruption of Mount Toba in Indonesia about 74,000 years ago. It was one of the largest volcanic events in the last 2 million years, releasing more than 2,000 cubic miles of ash and rock into the atmosphere. The sun dimmed. Temperatures dropped. Some scientists believe the global population of early humans fell to just a few thousand survivors. Now imagine what such an event would mean for an advanced society dependent on trade, agriculture, or complex technology. The skies would darken for months, crops would fail, entire regions would freeze. Within a generation, famine and collapse would sweep across the world. Even smaller disasters could have similar effects. A single asteroid impact, a pandemic, or the slow creep of environmental degradation could unravel a civilization's fabric. Modern humans like to think of collapse as a rare event, but history shows it's a constant possibility. The Roman Empire, the Maya, the Khmer, the ancestral Puebloans, all fell, leaving behind ruins that became part of the landscape. The difference between them and a civilization from 100,000 years ago is only time. Ours are still visible. Theirs would have been erased. But not all collapses are sudden. Some happen quietly, like the fading of a memory. A society might not be destroyed by violence or nature, but by its own evolution. Technologies can become too complex to sustain, populations too large for resources to support, ideologies too rigid to adapt. The people who come after might not even know they are living in the ruins of greatness. Their myths might recall a golden age, their rituals preserving fragments of forgotten knowledge. Eventually, the memory of the world before becomes legend, then story, then silence. And what if the survivors of such a civilization blended into other populations? Their descendants might carry traces of their brilliance, techniques for agriculture, astronomy, medicine, but stripped of their original meaning. Over thousands of generations, the knowledge would fragment and scatter until all that remained were echoes. The idea of gods descending from the sky, of lost continents, of forbidden wisdom passed down by beings who came before. Many ancient cultures speak of such figures, the civilizers who arrived after a great flood or a time of darkness, teaching humanity how to begin again. The flood itself is one of the oldest and most universal myths on Earth. It appears in Sumerian, Egyptian, Indian, Chinese, and Native American traditions. Plato wrote of Atlantis, a powerful island civilization swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. The Bible's story of Noah, the Hindu tale of Manu, the Sumerian account of Ziusudra, all describe the same thing: a world wiped clean, a chosen few who survive, and a rebirth. Could all of these be symbolic memories of a real event? Perhaps the end of that forgotten civilization coincided with the end of an ice age, when melting glaciers raised the oceans and swallowed the coasts. If that's true, then the drowned ruins of their world still exist, buried beneath the waves, sealed in silt and salt. We've already found smaller examples. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, lie the remains of ancient structures submerged for thousands of years. Off Japan's Yonaguni Island, massive stone terraces stretch across the seabed, resembling temples and stairs. Some believe they are natural, others see the outline of human design. Either way, they remind us how easily the ocean can hide a civilization's remains. The disappearance of an entire world is easier than we think. If humanity were to vanish today, nature would erase our presence with astonishing speed. Within a few hundred years, forests would reclaim cities, animals would fill the streets, and skyscrapers would collapse into dust. In 10,000 years, little would remain but scattered ruins. In 100,000, even those would be gone, buried under new mountains, broken by tectonic drift, or submerged beneath the sea. Our satellites, the symbols of our modern reach, would have long since burned in the atmosphere or drifted into space as silent debris. What chance, then, would an ancient civilization have had? Yet the end of a civilization doesn't mean the end of its influence. The planet may forget its monuments, but memory can take other forms. Genetic traces could endure in the DNA of future species. Chemical residues might linger in the soil. A story told around a fire could carry the essence of an entire world, transformed by time into legend. Imagine a hunter 1,000 generations later pointing to the stars and saying, "Our ancestors once lived among them." To him, it would sound like myth. To us, it might sound like truth. Perhaps that's the cruelest and most beautiful thing about history. It never truly ends. It simply folds into itself. Each age carries the ghosts of the one before, invisible but present. We build over their bones, we breathe the same air, we drink the same water. The atoms that make us once belonged to other civilizations, other lives, other dreams. In that sense, nothing is ever lost, only rearranged. Still, the thought of such total erasure is unsettling. It forces us to question our place in the timeline. If we are not the first, then what are we? A repetition? A sequel? A faint echo of a greater age? And if it happened once, could it happen again? To us? Maybe the real warning isn't hidden in ruins or myths, but in the mirror. We are building our own fragility every day, changing the climate, exhausting the land, filling the oceans with our waste. If the Earth erased another civilization before, it could do so again. This time, ours. The silence of the deep past is not just mystery, it's prophecy. It tells us what happens when intelligence outruns wisdom, when progress becomes blind, when memory fails. Perhaps that is why the question of the lost world matters, not because we need to prove it existed, but because we need to know what it means if it did. For in the end, the greatest ruins are not the ones we can't find. They are the ones we are still building. If undeniable proof surfaced tomorrow that an advanced civilization had thrived 100,000 years ago, everything we know about human history would have to be rewritten. It would not just change textbooks, it would change the way we see ourselves. We would realize that progress is not a straight line, that intelligence does not belong only to us, and that memory is far more fragile than we ever imagined. The discovery would be both humbling and terrifying, because it would mean our civilization is not the first to rise, and perhaps not the first to fall. At first, the world would react with disbelief. Scientists would argue over the evidence, an artifact too complex for its age, a chemical signature too deliberate to be natural, or a structure too precise to be coincidence. Governments would fund emergency expeditions. Universities would hold heated debates. The media would erupt with speculation. Ancient astronauts, hidden continents, the ghosts of gods. But beyond the noise, a quiet awe would spread. For the first time, humanity would look at itself not as the beginning of civilization, but as one iteration in an ancient cycle of creation and loss. The implications would be immense. Archaeology would no longer be about tracing the origins of humanity, but about mapping the forgotten chapters of our story. History would stretch backward not 10,000 years, but 100,000, and perhaps further still. It would also force us to ask new questions. Were these ancient people human like us, or something else? Did they descend from our ancestors, or did we descend from them? Were they destroyed by nature, by war, or by their own design? And most haunting of all, did they know it was coming? Philosophers and theologians would be forced to reconsider everything from the meaning of creation to the definition of progress. Religions might struggle with the idea that divine knowledge was not unique to a single moment in time, but has emerged again and again across epochs. In this new understanding, enlightenment would not be a destination, but a recurring event, a spark that flares, fades, and returns when the world is ready once more. And yet, the discovery would also cast a shadow over our modern world. We pride ourselves on our mastery of nature, our technology, our ability to shape the future. But if others before us reached similar heights and vanished, what does that say about us? Maybe intelligence alone is not enough to survive. Maybe every civilization reaches a tipping point, a moment when its brilliance becomes its undoing. For those who came before, it might have been volcanoes, asteroids, or ice. For us, it could be climate change, war, or the silent erosion of meaning. If time has already witnessed the rise and fall of other great worlds, then our task is not simply to wonder what they built, but to learn from their disappearance. What choices did they make that led to their end? Did they destroy their environment, as we are doing now? Did they fight over resources, or lose themselves in the pursuit of power and pride? The answers may never be known, but the pattern is familiar. Every empire believes it will last forever. Every age believes it stands at the pinnacle of progress, and every age eventually fades into dust. Perhaps that's why the idea of a lost civilization resonates so deeply. It mirrors our own fears. It is both mystery and mirror, prophecy and warning. When we imagine an ancient world of wonder now buried beneath the ocean, we are really imagining ourselves. Our cities underwater, our machines rusting in the dark, our languages forgotten. The story of the lost world is the story of what could happen to us. But there's another side to the mystery, one that offers hope rather than fear. If others have risen before us, it means the universe has a way of renewing itself. Intelligence, creativity, and curiosity are not accidents. They are part of Earth's design. Each civilization, no matter how brief, contributes something to the memory of the planet, even if that memory lies beyond our reach. Perhaps that is why we feel an inexplicable nostalgia for places we've never seen. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. Perhaps some quiet part of our DNA remembers. And maybe that memory is not just biological but spiritual, a resonance that connects every age of consciousness that has ever bloomed on this planet. In that sense, we are not alone. We are the continuation of an ancient experiment, a flame passed from one epoch to the next. What we call progress might simply be the process of remembering what was once known. Think about it. We look at the stars and wonder if someone else is out there, yet the real mystery may lie beneath us, not above. The ground we walk on could be the roof of another world. The stones we use to build our cities might once have formed the walls of theirs. Every mountain, every ocean, every layer of soil is a palimpsest, history written, erased, and rewritten again. The earth is not keeping secrets from us. It's just patient. It waits for us to ask the right questions. And when we do, we might realize that the evidence has been in front of us all along, in the myths that echo across continents, in the strange out-of-place artifacts that defy explanation, in the unexplained precision of ancient architecture, and in the quiet intuition that we have been here before. Our ancestors may not have been primitive dreamers, but survivors, keepers of a story so vast that it could only be told in symbols carved into stone, whispered through generations, disguised as legend. If we ever find the proof, a single artifact, a genetic trace, a message preserved in the deep, the first reaction will not be triumph, but recognition. We will feel it not as discovery, but as remembrance. We will know that we are part of something older than our records, older than our myths, older even than the continents themselves. And in that realization, our arrogance will soften. We will see that civilization is not a ladder we climb, but a circle we travel, a breath that expands and contracts through time. To understand that is to finally see ourselves in proportion to the earth, temporary, fragile, and yet capable of extraordinary renewal. Perhaps the lost civilization of 100,000 years ago is not truly lost. Perhaps it survives through us, in our curiosity, in our creativity, in our longing to understand where we came from. Every time we build, explore, and dream, we echo them. Every time we look into the dark and wonder, we continue their story. And that may be the real lesson buried in the silence of deep time. That no civilization is truly gone so long as another remembers to ask the question. What if we are not the beginning of the story, but simply its latest chapter, one that will also fade, but not before leaving a trace for those who come next. One day, long after our cities have crumbled and our satellites have fallen from the sky, the earth will breathe again, and somewhere in that distant future, another being will look upon the ruins of our world and whisper the same words we whisper tonight. What came before us? And the answer, carried on the wind, will be the same one it has always been: soft, ancient, and infinite. Welcome to Deformed History.